The late 1940s and early 50s were a time of heightened tension and paranoia in the U.S. Deep fear tormented America, causing tighter restraints on the freedom of its citizens. In the midst of the early Cold War and the paranoia caused by communism, threatening to completely alter the order of society, the government sought to enforce more regulations to eliminate any possible threats to the nation. One main area of focus was in the artistic world, because free-spirited artists were more likely to defy authority and follow what they believed in. Americans hoped to stop the spread of communism by putting their faith in the Production Code Administration and government censors. On the other hand, many believed that censorship was a violation of rights. But with the excitement and tremendous support of the McCarthy hearings, most First Amendment supporters went unheard. There was talk of a Soviet bomb and the possibility of a nuclear war loomed above the head of the U.S. In addition, there was a concern for the troops just sent overseas to fight a war in Korea. The entire country was walking on eggshells, trying to keep it together while always on edge, waiting for the enemy to strike at any moment. Meanwhile, Joseph Burston was preparing to present his prized possession that would send New York off the edge, permanently changing censorship and how movies were perceived in the United States. Some people believe that the government should take responsibility and censor things from the public, while others believe the government does not have any right to infringe on their liberties. U.S. history has shown the struggle between these two extremes, and in the mid-1900s, this argument was prominent. The New York Board of Motion Picture Censorship took the responsibility of protecting the public from profanity in 1909. It later became the National Board of Review because eventually most major motion picture producers agreed to not release any films unless they received the board's seal of approval. This seal was the film industry's first formal attempt to prevent legal censorship through self-regulation.
Mutual Film Corp v. Industrial Commission of Ohio held was that just a business, and that the state has legitimate police power to regulate businesses, and it wasn't considered as part of a free press.
In the 1915 case, it was also decided that states had the right to censor, leading to an influx of censored movies. The Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, formed in 1922, also pursued self-regulation policies. They established a branch, later called the Production Code Administration, specifically to regulate content by controlling the film's moral values. In 1934, the American Catholic Church formed the Legion of Decency, whose goal was to monitor motion pictures and organize mass actions against them, much like they did against an Italian film called The Miracle, which was banned because of its sacrilegious messages. Although the government does have the right to ban media for the greater good of the public, in the case of Burston v. Wilson, the government overstepped its boundaries by disregarding the separation of church and state and the First Amendment. The Miracle, directed by Roberto Rossellini, is an Italian film viewed as sacrilegious by many conservatives. The film, inspired by the story of Mother Mary, portrays a young woman, Nani, who is seduced by a traveler she believes to be Saint Joseph. After begging to be taken out of her miserable life, he intoxicates her and presumably takes advantage of her. Unable to remember the event clearly, she soon discovers she is pregnant and concludes that the child has been immaculately conceived. The people of the town ridicule her until she is forced to leave. The film abruptly ends after she has her child. The Miracle did not do well in Italy, so Rossellini brought it to the Venice Film Festival, where American film distributor Joseph Burston fell in love with the film and brought it to America. Burston was a Polish immigrant who was also a pioneer of foreign film appreciation in the U.S. In 1950, he brought the film to New York, and it received the seal of approval from New York censors. Shortly after its debut at New York's Paris Theater, powerful Catholics, including the Legion of Decency, attacked the film and alerted City License Commissioner of New York, Edward McCaffrey. Once he saw the film, he immediately ordered the theater to stop showing it and then proceeded to revoke the theater's license because he found the film officially and personally blasphemous.
The government was trying to protect harmful material from being disseminated to people, including youths. The Miracle, it was an Italian, depicted what they considered to be sacrilegious scenes, sacrilegious to the Catholic Church.
Other than the sacrilegious messages, including ridicule of the Virgin Mary, the film was partially banned because of the church's dislike of Rossellini. A year prior to The Miracle, he had been filming his movie Stromboli when he had an affair with actress Ingrid Bergman, who left her own husband and child to marry Rossellini. However, the case was not just about The Miracle, but also the struggle between two states of the American mind, conservatives and liberals. Conservatives, mainly members and leaders of the church, had traditional values, which included placing limits on individual behavior for the common good, while liberals had a more democratic understanding of modern culture. The church also used the decision made in the case Mutual Film Corporation v. Industrial Commission of Ohio to justify banning the film because it stated that movies were not protected under the First Amendment. The court hearing was held on April 24, 1952. Ephraim London, Burstyn's lawyer, made the argument that the film had been incorrectly reviewed and was not sacrilegious but the story of a deeply religious woman who was taken advantage of. Other arguments were that banning the movie was a violation of the First Amendment, the guarantee of due process, and freedom of expression. On May 26, 1952, it was decided that the film could be shown in theaters on the grounds that banning the film violated the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and the promise of separation of church and state. The case had a monumental effect on not only movie censorship but in other genres of censorship as well. Not only did it become more difficult to censor movies, but it also overruled the decision made in Mutual Film Corporation v. Industrial Commission of Ohio. It signaled a cultural and legal shift away from production codes and censors as well. More profane movies like The Moon is Blue were box office hits despite not receiving the code seal. Because of the Miracle case, the church could no longer engage government in suppressing heresy. Furthermore, it invalidated many local and state movie censorship boards and changed the movie industry's rating standards, leading to the modern-day rating system. Prior to 1952, movies were more easily censored and deemed too obscene for viewers. The Miracle case and the approaching end of the Second Red Scare changed this and caused a decline of the church's influence on the nation. The Legion of Decency and the Production Code Administration's conservative leaders retired and were replaced by more liberal leaders to better represent the new era of bolder movies. In 1965, state censorship ended completely, the church's Legion of Decency changed its name, and a year later the Production Code Administration dropped its code. In the past, movies were censored to preserve the innocence of youth, and although this is not as prevalent today, movies are still somewhat censored in that they are rated. However, this is done loosely, and there is still a question of what requirements a movie must fill in order to be seen as more mature. Intense violence, excessive cursing, drug abuse, or sexual content are the leading factors the Motion Picture Association of America uses to give a movie an R rating. Although, this organization tends to be more tolerant towards copious amounts of aggression, normally giving a violent movie the PG-13 rating. Tipper Gore wanted to preserve the innocence of youth by putting warning labels on music and making sure that people knew what they were buying, because the parents have a responsibility to protect their children from inappropriate music. She helped form the Parents Music Resource Center, which took the argument to Supreme Court. Her beliefs were countered by several musicians, including Frank Zappa and Dee Snider.
My name is Frank Zappa. This is my attorney, Larry Stein. The PMRC proposal is an ill-conceived piece of nonsense which fails to deliver any real benefits to children, infringes the civil liberties of people who are not children. Why haven't you considered your child's need for consumer information? Music appreciation costs very little compared to sports expenditures. Your children have a right to know that something besides pop music exists.
It is my job as a parent to monitor what my children see, hear, and read during their preteen years. The full responsibility for this falls on the shoulders of my wife and I, because there is no one else capable of making these judgments for us.
Bottom line, with respect to these particular records, the Supreme Court has found that there is that right and that responsibility.
It was decided that parental advisory labels would be issued to explicit music, although the warnings were generic and did not specifically categorize the profanity of the lyrics as originally desired by the Parents Music Resource Center. The government has some responsibility to protect the public from profanity, like putting warning labels on music or rating movies to inform the public of the material's content. However, in the case of Burstyn v. Wilson, the government overstepped its boundaries by violating the First Amendment and banning a movie people had the right to see. In many cases, especially in modern times, people will be exposed to this sort of content despite the attempts to protect them from it.
Uno sguardo ed un sorriso m'han svelato il tuo segreto che sei stata